Welcome, everybody. We have another special episode of Crypto Mondays. I'm shooting from a remote location here in Condado. We're down by the beach, but I didn't want to be by the beach because I didn't want the noise to pollute the sound stream. We have another special guest this week. We have a good friend of mine, also a mentor of mine in a lot of ways, and I don't even think he knew about it till today. But with that being said, we had Mr. Sean King from here in Condado, San Juan. Sean, why don't you tell them a little bit more about yourself and your background and exactly who you are, sir?
I'm Sean. I'm an attorney and a CPA, but I've spent my whole career really working in the insurance and investment advisory world, and over the last few years in the management and strategic sort of business consulting world, and live and work here from beautiful Condado in San Juan, Puerto Rico. We love it. I encourage anybody who may be listening who's not already here in Puerto Rico, who may be interested in taking a look at it, to come visit, at least certainly in the next few months as we get the COVID stuff behind us. Come check out Puerto Rico. It's a fabulous place to live and work from.
Yeah, there are several what I call super nodes in San Juan. And these are guys who pretty much, from combination of what they do and lighten up the air around them, and also too from the influx of people that they've inspired to move here. Michael Turpin, obviously, I would say would be, the head of that list, especially in the cryptocurrency space. Obviously, Brock Pierce with the wave that he brought in. Myself, humbly, I'd like to say that I probably like maybe 250 people have come through our network into the fold. And then there's you, who so many people that when I actually get to know them after knowing them for so long, they turn around and they're like, yeah, well, I know Sean either through the internet or from back home. And Sean has just been literally preaching Puerto Rico to everyone for a long time. And that's why I'm here, is because of Sean King. So I'm grateful for you in that regard. I'm always, excited to have, any sort of communication with you, because every time I promise you I learn something. So I know you have a tendency to be humble, but I want you to talk a little bit more about your interest in the blockchain space, your experience, and exactly, more along the lines of like, how is it that you've come to some of the processes that you have today that have ultimately led to you honestly being so successful in some of your decision making. But yeah, let's just talk a little bit more about your experience in the blockchain space. How long have you been involved? And what exactly, made you turn the corner? Because quite frankly, you are what you would call smart money, right? Institutional money. And, these are the guys that are like just now coming around. However, you've seen it 10 years ago and was way ahead of the curve. So let's just talk about your experience in the industry, and then ultimately what was the aha moment for you that made you realize this thing's real, this thing has legs, and I need to get involved?
Well, yeah. So I owe a lot of people. Everything I learned from somebody, and I certainly learned about Puerto Rico from Peter Schiff, who the guy cannot get his mind around blockchain. I don't get it, but we're going to get him there someday.
I've seen him not too long ago at a gas station. I was asking him.
I mean, we got to get him awake, but we'll get there eventually. But I learned about blockchain from an investment newsletter. It was actually just Bitcoin at the time, an investment newsletter published by, was it Robert? Last name is Prichter, out of Gainesville, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. And he's a famous Elliott Wave market technician, tracks the stock market. And in 2011-ish timeframe, early 2011, he happened to mention this. And in one of his newsletters in passing, and it was kind of the end of his newsletter. It was just a paragraph or two, and I was intrigued. And I went online and started Googling, and you couldn't find anything at the time. There was the Bitcoin Talk Forum. This was back again in 2011. There was the Bitcoin Talk Forum, but there was literally nothing on any of the social media platforms to speak of about Bitcoin or blockchain or any of this. So I started just reading everything I could. I started, Googling it every weekend and reading the latest. And I just became incredibly impressed by the ability of the technology to essentially force is not the right word, but to compel consensus. to provide economic incentives that compel people to arrive at a consensus around truths. And I'm using truths in a relative sense there. It's the consensus truth. And I was at the time struggling, and this is part of the reason why I developed so many of the maxims. I was struggling with the fact that, how do we in this modern age with social media, with this advanced technology, Photoshop and everything else, how do we discern truth? And I think that's really one of the main reasons I was originally drawn to blockchain and why I stuck with it. But make a long story short, I managed to jump through lots of hoops, and it did take lots of hoops at the time, to buy some Bitcoin in 2011 from BitInstant and Charlie Shrem's operation at the time. And it was cumbersome. It was a pain, but I spent like 4 days just to get my hands on a little bit of that initial Bitcoin. And I've been largely a holder ever since. I've cashed out quite a bit when I moved to Puerto Rico and to buy our place here and to transition business and to do some of that stuff. But
that is a very humble way of saying he has the Bruce Wayne place on Condado Beach that he cashed out a little bit to purchase.
It's heaven for us. It really is. And
it's heaven for almost everybody that's ever been there. In fact, the only people it's not heaven for are the people that leave.
And thank you for that. And so we've made some of those sort of investments and some other things, but I'm still a huge believer in the technology. I'm a huge Bitcoin fan. Not a Bitcoin maximalist by any stretch of the imagination, but love Bitcoin, love blockchain. I think if I'm capable of anything, I'm not really a technician. I don't understand the ins and outs of how the technology works, but I do understand its relevance. I do understand its significance. I do understand what it does and therefore what impact it's going to have on society and the transformative impact it's going to have on society. It is, in my estimation, more significant than the internet in the impact it's going to have on society. It's probably as significant as the invention of the printing press in terms of how it's going to reorganize society and decentralize so many different things. And it's perhaps as also significant as double entry bookkeeping and the impact that had on society. So it's a transformational technology that is in its early stages. And if I'm good at anything, I think it's just at understanding what that impact is likely to be and positioning myself to potentially benefit from that.
No, and again, ultimately, these are very humble positions from your point of view. Again, this is something that I've come to realize, right? In my experience in dealing with wealthy investors and just wealthy people, period, in general. They're generally very conservative. There's an easy answer for that. You don't want to lose what you already have. The people that don't have money are the ones that are more apt to take more risk because they don't care if they lose it. They don't have any. They're not used to having it. The people that have money are very, very cautious about engaging in new markets. So, I mean, you say all these things very lightly, like it was very normal, but I'm sure you realize you're in a very, very, very small percentage of the population of people who already had something going on for themselves in their life at a significant level, and seeing blockchain that early on, and we're like, okay, this is a real thing, because most people looked at it as like, yeah, this is a scam. This is the tulips of the 2000s. And, this thing is going to go down in a ball of flames. And every time Bitcoin market crashed, they were the first ones jumping up and saying, hey, I told you that's not a real asset. It's not no such thing as a real investment. And it's just, it's fool's gold. However, again, you not only took that position, but you've also defended that position for quite some time. And you've been a part of several organizations, if I'm not mistaken, in the support and the outspread of cryptocurrency and blockchain long before it became popular. And I'm sure you took a lot of bullets and a lot of arrows from your very same friends and colleagues that you had relationships with who were not supporters of the industry and thought that you were potentially involving yourself with something that could be used as, even perceived as criminal or mischievous or dubious and devious type actors that participated in the industry early on. So, I mean, I think that in itself lends a lot. And what I think that ultimately what I want our viewers and our community to understand is the reason, in my opinion, why you were able to make that type of decision, even coming from what I would say is a conservative position because of where you were in life, is because of your maxims and the decision making that you have put out, or the process that you go about, going to make your decisions on new information and new topics and whether or not they're worthy of your time. Where did you get this whole concept for maxims and like just basically defining your life? Like, this is me, and this is what I am, and this is how I will be. Because I don't think I've seen that elsewhere. I've seen people have certain sets of values and morals that they live on, so on and so forth. But it seems like you've almost really given a lot of thought about a lot of different aspects of your life and really have a set position about that. To me, that's mind-boggling. It's always open to new information, new technologies, and also new resources that you can revisit your initial position and still be flexible with it. However, stay firm in what you believe in. And I think it's truly impressive. I really do.
Well, thank you. As I said, I've had many mentors over my career, and all of the maxims come from someone else. I don't think I'm personally responsible for very many of them. Maybe a few, but my father and my mother beat a lot of them into my head from the time I was a young child.
I've had several conversations with your father on Facebook, by the way. You definitely didn't fall far from the tree. He's very brilliant as well.
Oh, both my parents are amazing and have been incredible role models. Nicholas Nassim Taleb, author of The Black Swan, I read his books and was just so impressed with his approach to decision making. I mean, something that has just fascinated me for 15 years now, really since the dawn of the internet age, 20 years, has been this challenge that I just knew we were going to face, and we are increasingly facing it. We're seeing it right now today with these election results of how do we, and the whole COVID conspiracy theories and all of that. I mean, how do we discern what is true? And when we can't discern what is true, how do we make effective, sound decisions under conditions of great uncertainty? Those have been two topics that have just fascinated me. And eventually I began to just sort of collect these sayings that I eventually labeled maxims, and to collate them, to organize them, and to refine them. There have been some that I clung to that proved not to be true, and I ended up having to toss them. There have been others that I've slightly refined over the years, and as a consequence of various experiences that I've had. But ultimately, they've become added to, deleted from, refined, and edited to the point where they really do serve, I think, as a very, very effective guide in making decisions, especially under conditions of uncertainty. And if you apply these maxims, I think your life is going to be far, far better than if you don't. And I can say that because, once again, I'm responsible for developing almost none of them. Everything I learned from somebody. So they're fantastic tools. I got the term maxims, actually, I think, from University of Tennessee football. I'm a University of Tennessee football fan. And the University of Tennessee football team, it's been hard to be a fan lately, but they have team maxims. These are maxims that General Nayland, for the most part, created when he was the coach there in the 50s and 60s. And they've proven to be, very important, I think, in the culture of Tennessee football, and except for recent years, the overall general success they've had. And so I kind of got the idea from there to take these sayings and to more formalize them, to make them more practical, to make them more workable, and develop this list of maxims that I use really on a daily, almost hourly basis to sort of guide decision making. What investments do I make or not make? How do I approach COVID? How do I make a decision about, whether to travel during these times or not? These maxims really inform pretty much every decision I make today.
And again, I have seen that and witnessed it for both, in the time that you and I have had interactions, and also too just in your thought process. And The back end of that is like, like, look, anyone can say anything, right? Anyone can say anything they want. But to me, I don't know about anybody else. To me, I only look at people who are successful in the areas that I want to be successful in for advice. Now, I can listen to someone who I can listen to someone who is maybe not potentially, an expert in the field, and definitely maybe get a bit of, information that could be potentially, positive for me. But as far as having, someone that you would look at and say, hey, this is a person who absolutely knows what they're talking about. For me, that experience shows through, like where you are in your life. And again, you're doing very well for yourself, very well, just fine. So why don't we talk about these maxims specifically related towards decision making in terms of investments that you do not have, obviously, 100% accurate information on, and how is it that you're able to discern, truth from falsehood, and then when you're unclear on the falsehood of whether or not something's falsehood or not, what do you do with that information?
Yeah, so just to maybe put out a little bit of bona fides here. Although the maxims weren't formalized at the time, I did use many of these sayings to guide the decision-making process, for example, about whether to take a risk on Bitcoin in 2011. And I used them again in 2014 and participated in the Ethereum crowd sale at the time in 2014 on the Ethereum side. I used them again a year and a half, 2 years ago when good catch. A year and a half, 2 years ago when I chose to get involved in Chainlink and in the day-to-day business decisions that I make in the various operating businesses that I'm involved with. So they have worked, and one of those maxims is that the price of being right when it matters is being frequently wrong when it doesn't. You're going to be wrong if you are engaged in sound decision making, and if you are engaged in effective risk management. You're going to be wrong more often than you are right. That's not a problem. The trick is simply to be right when it matters and to be wrong when it doesn't matter, right? And so I'm constantly looking for opportunities where they're asymmetrical, where the downside is limited and the upside is absolutely enormous. That's just a starting point. There are lots of scams out there that present themselves as having limited downside and tremendous upside. So you can't just make a decision based on that criteria alone. But that's one of the first sort of threshold criteria is, can I engage in this transaction in a way where my downside is limited? And a lot of these blockchain projects, wow. You just can't think of a better opportunity where the downside was limited. You could put in literally just a few $1,000s at the time. Even today, I think you can still put in a few $1,000s in Bitcoin, a few $1,000s in Ethereum, a few $1,000s in Chainlink and EOS, IOTA, perhaps some others. And the upside is potentially enormous. Not guaranteed. I frankly lost tens of thousands of dollars on lots of shit coins, right? But that's the price of being right when it mattered. That was the price of being right about Bitcoin, of being right about Ethereum. I'm being right, I'm real sure, about Chainlink. So
what would you say was the one you was the most wrong about, that you thought for sure this is a winner and that thing bombed hard?
Probably, you're going to make me embarrass myself here. Probably Civic, honestly, the Civic token, Vinny's token that he came out with. I still have some hope that project may ultimately pay off at some point, but it had a lot of promise. It was well marketed. It was well presented. It's a great concept. Solving identity is one of the fundamental challenges that the blockchain world faces. But it just is not really done much so far. So I'm definitely way underwater on that one. But I only risked a few $1,000s, and that's all you have to risk in these sort of things. And really not even that much. A few hundred in some cases can be life-changing if you happen to continue with these maxims and make sound decisions. Again, you're going to be wrong more often than you're right, but when they're right, it's going to matter.
The biggest winner I've had in my experience in crypto from the little bit amount of money, I don't even think I should say this publicly, so I'm not going to say it, but let's just say I turned $100 into over six figures with Dogecoin.
Yeah, all right. I know a lot of people.
The biggest percentage I have of that was Doge, and it all happened in like 8 months in like 2017.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that did well with that at one point.
All right, so one of the things I wanted to talk about was, and I kind of alluded to this inside of our post in relation towards this upcoming conversation, was how that a lot of your maxims have affected the way I've organized our community here. Now, you guys we are just now within the past 2 months, maybe 3 months now, starting to step up our presence on the internet and becoming, a little bit more of a media type production with, more focus on virtual events and our reach and the extent of our network outside of San Juan. But we've been doing this for almost 3 years. And here in San Juan, not only do we have the weekly meetups, but the community as a whole generally does almost everything together. I guess a lot of it too is because we're like not Puerto Rican. I'm Puerto Rican, but the majority of us here are not Puerto Ricans living in Puerto Rico. Kind of like shrinks the pool of people you're going to hang out with. And then on top of that, you have the tax benefits that also makes you at a certain level that makes you want to interact with other people that are at a certain level. And then, of course, if you add crypto to it, then on top of that, you're going to be really small, and the demographic really small. And with that, we kind of like all overlap with each other. So what I'm getting at is that in this community, we've had more than just our meetups and the way we interact with each other in our meetups, but we have our lives that we interact with as a whole, and we really take it as a community as opposed to just a weekly meetup where we just kind of say hi to each other and talk about crypto. A lot of anybody who has known me, and maybe even a lot of things that people have given me credit for, have come because I literally think about a lot of stuff that you say and think to myself, number one of the things that you said that was pretty important early on was you said you're not a Bitcoin maximalist. I mean, is Bitcoin my favorite token? Yeah. But is it my only token that I like or coin that I like? Of course not. There's a bunch of them that have very real applications. What about, you ever hear about something called Ethereum? Right? Smart contracts is literally changing the way that we do business all the way around the board right now. Very real. And there's a bunch of them. It's not just Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Chainlink. There's a lot of them. And guess what? It's tech. So you know what that means? 6 months or a year from now, somebody could produce tech that outdate the previous tech. And that's what happens. You don't know the future. So I think it's important that we as a community, and I've always had this mindset in this position, hence why you guys don't see Crypto Mondays, like sponsored by, Ethereum or EOS. You might see a meetup sponsored by these guys in a particular event we're promoting, but I'm not biased towards any particular blockchain. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of the things that Sean has basically posted publicly. And it just gave me a lot to think about because I understand the amount of influence that I have over the community here and potentially globally. So with that, I wanted to extend to Sean, basically say, hey, Sean, instead of you doing this from behind closed doors and not anyone really realizing that a lot of the stuff that I talk about comes from you, let's just make it public. And hopefully we can get some of these maxims, publicly. And that's what we're in the process of working on now. So let's talk about a little bit about what the maxims are that you think would apply to our organization, and how that you see that this being a value add to our community without particular any biases or creating any biases or alienating anybody.
Well, yeah, I think you're going to alienate people. There's no doubt about that.
If you're saying we don't want you, how about that?
Yeah, if you're not a maximist, you're going to alienate, the people that are maximalists. And if you are a maximalist, you'll alienate those who aren't, et cetera. So, I grew up with a sales background, and with the sales background, you are trained to really, identify a prospect and then try to persuade that prospect to do business with you. And the very last thing you want to do in sales is to alienate a prospect, somebody that you worked hard to get introduced to, somebody that you worked hard to meet, to develop a relationship with. The last thing you want to do is alienate them. And yet, when you're doing marketing, the approach is completely different. I was serving on a committee. This is one of my big life lessons. Many years ago, we were going through a rebrand for an investment advisory business that I'm involved with. And the consultants that we had basically drove this point home, because we had all really come from sales backgrounds, and we weren't getting as far as quickly as we should be in this rebrand process, because we were all concerned about alienating somebody. And these guys said, look, have you ever seen in a BMW commercial? And we're like, yeah. And they said, what's the motto for BMW? Well, the ultimate driving machine. That's BMW. And he said, you do realize, don't you, that throwing that out there as BMW's motto alienates a lot of people? We're like, really? They're like, absolutely. There's a lot of people that don't want to drive the ultimate driving machine, that are offended by people who want to drive souped up, sporty cars instead of, environmentally friendly cars, et cetera. And he said, the Subaru buyer is going to be alienated by the BMW commercial, and the BMW buyer is going to be alienated by the Subaru commercial, et cetera. So when you're doing marketing, you've just got to resign yourself to the fact that if you're going to be impactful at all, you're going to alienate some people. And this, in fact, is one of the maxims, and that is that if you're going to do anything worthwhile, the price of doing something worthwhile is alienating people who have different views than you do. And the only way not to alienate people, quite frankly, is to be irrelevant, to be mediocre. And if you're ever going to be excellent, you're going to offend some people. And so as you're approaching this idea here with Crypto Monday San Juan, I think that's got to be part of it. We're not going to go out there and intentionally seek to alienate people, to turn people off, but we've got to vibe our tribe. We've got to go out and put forth the energy and the viewpoints and the processes and the disciplined thinking that is going to attract people that harmonize with that. And frankly, it's going to alienate some of those who don't, and that's okay. That's not our goal. But if we try to be all things to all people, we'll be nothing to anybody.
These are the facts. So, I can't agree with you anymore. Ultimately, I like to think that, like in terms of our family, this is what I tell people all the time. We have a litany of events that we do together and stuff like that. And people are always asking, is it okay if I bring this person, if I bring that person? And my response to them is always the same. Depending on who it is, obviously, obviously if it's a certain member of our community, I automatically expect that whoever it is they're bringing with them is going to be of a certain caliber. Like if you ever told me to have XYZ said guest, I'm not even going to question whether or not that person's going to fit our tribe. But, obviously you want to have a standard. And the standard is very simple. It's just basically, man, if you have good vibes and you have good energy and you live in a life of abundance and you want to be of service, you want to add value. This is what I tell people all the time. If you know me, if you've ever had any interaction with me, I do everything I can on planet Earth to provide you with more value than I'm taking away from you. And if I haven't done that, I feel encumbered and indebted to you to continuously try to find a way to make it up to you. And if not, then I'm not going to associate with you, because I never want to be in a position where I go to speak to somebody and they're just like, they don't want anything to do with me, because all you do is extract from them. And, the back end of that is true as well, as you want to have symbiotic value add relationships. And I think Puerto Rico, just in general, just what's going on right now with our community and the way it's growing, I don't think I have to do too much policing of that particular policy. However, when we start talking about our organization and how we want to run our organization, having things on paper and just truly defining of what is the kind of service providers that we either promote or partner with within our organization, and also various types of companies that we display. This is one thing for us as individuals to have a code of morals and ethics, but also too, we want to make sure that the guys that we're representing, because the community listens to us and they trust us. So I look at the community as my family, and I'm not going to give my family any bad advice, nor am I going to pair my family with bad people. And I think ultimately those are the kind of things that we want to outline. So yeah, I am very excited about us, formally tackling this project. I am super grateful to you because I know that you live a very busy, and not even just busy, you live a very good life, man. Bottom line, you got good things going on for you. You have tremendous relationship with your family. Both of you, well, all three of your children are awesome, but your twins that are of age, right, and are in the industry, I expect both out of both of them really big things. I can imagine their futures both very bright. So I'm excited about you actually formally coming on board with us and really putting some of that intellectual capital you have to try to help us foster our community and grow even more. Do we have any questions? I can't see if we have any questions in the comments. Is there any questions over there? Sean?
I'm not seeing the comment window still for some reason. So
yeah, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add, Sean, but from my perspective, the only thing I could say is you do have a website that you recently started. I want to talk about that. I want to give you a little plug for that because I think that you do have, again, value add proposition. And I think that it is a subscription service, is it not?
Not yet. Maybe someday. Right now, I'm mainly just transitioning from Facebook, which is not probably the best forum for some of my thought pieces, to a forum that's maybe a little better.
No censorship, right? Yeah, we can't be
censored. On Substack, it's called A King's Eye View. And what I'll do, Pedro, is probably tomorrow morning I'll publish. I don't think I've published on A King's Eye View the maxims, so I'll publish those there and then link to them. And then perhaps if you want to share those with with the Crypto Mondays crowd, they'll be able to reference those in a place. And they're welcome to make comments, ask questions. The maxims are real clear to me just because I apply them, and so I understand the context in which I wrote them. They're not necessarily going to be clear to everybody else, so I'm happy to answer questions about what I mean when I say X or Y, or how would you apply this in a certain context, those sort of things.
And I will tell you that something you said earlier today just really rang true with me when you and I spoke earlier today discussing all this. When you said that a lot of your information you receive from people a lot more intelligent than you that probably are not able to communicate with the target intended audience that you're looking to communicate with, and you act as basically a filter to basically take the information that they're sending to you, which at times you yourself don't even understand, and be able to communicate it in a way that maybe the layman or a person who's not as far along that path would be able to decipher and digest. And for me, I have always looked at myself as that person, and been told that constantly because of the two-sided equation. One hand, I'm extremely intelligent and I've been blessed by God to learn a lot of things. And, I read a ton. Like I don't watch TV at all. And I read a lot, and I definitely absorb a lot of information. I'm very perceptive. I watch people and learn. But the other end of it is that I come from an environment that's not so educated. And I come from an environment, and I'm used to dealing with people that are at the lower rungs of society. So I'm used to communicating with them, even though my mind was in another place. So what I think is, when I heard you say that this morning, I should have mentioned that to you this morning, was I think that I'm the next step beneath that, where I can take the stuff that you're spitting out and the concepts that maybe some people are unable to grasp, and I can take that, I can dumb it down a little bit further to other people that can maybe not necessarily grasp that. So I have absolutely no problem working with you on that, and any level of participation I can have, I would love to help you out with that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I appreciate you saying it. I don't know that it's a matter necessarily of dumbing it down. I think it's a matter of phrasing it in a way that certain people can relate to. And so everybody has their own background. Everybody has their own toolbox of experiences and of symbols and of vocabulary. And I'm able to articulate some of the things that, Nassim Taleb says, for example, in a way that resonates with a certain group of people. But the stuff that I'm saying, I may not be using the same toolbox. I may not be speaking the language, and it's not necessarily that they're not intelligent enough to get it. It's just they're coming from a completely different background than I am, a completely different set of vocabulary and underlying assumptions. And so the more people that I think we can get translating some of these very important ideas, and I think the work that Nassim Taleb, author of The Black Swan and Anti-Fragile, the work that he's done is probably some of the most important work of the last century at least, and maybe more than that, regarding risk management and decision-making under conditions of uncertainty. I think the more people we can get translating that information into words and symbols and using tools that other people are familiar with, the better off society is going to be. And right now it needs it like never before. I'm really both very concerned and very optimistic about where we're heading. I'm very concerned because with deep fakes, with technology in the next 5 or 10 years, disinformation campaigns and propaganda. I mean, you're literally going to be able to see someone on screen saying something, and you are just not going to know whether that's true or not, whether that is a deep fake video, whether that is real. And when people allow their biases to help them discern, do I believe this or not? They end up stepping in piles of dog crap all of the time, and they hurt themselves, and more importantly, they hurt those that rely on them. So if we can have tools like blockchains, if we can have tools like the maxims that aid us in making decisions, and again, when we apply these maxims, we're going to be wrong more than we're right, but that's the price we pay for being right when it matters. And if we can get people understanding this and grasping this and using lots of different words and different languages and different symbols to do that, then the world's going to be a lot better place and a lot more secure place for all of us. So we have a window right now where it's going to get very chaotic over the next 5 to 10 years, and we have this window where we have blockchains coming online that's going to help with a lot of that, because blockchains incentivize truth. They incentivize consensus. In a world where opinions are cheap, blockchains make opinions very costly. If you have a foolish, stupid opinion, you pay a price for that in a blockchain world that you don't pay in our present world. So we have tools like blockchains, we have tools like the maxims that are going to be a big, big help. But man, we've got a lot of work to do in the next 5 or 10 years to try to keep the wheels from falling off as things just get more uncertain, less clear. You know, you don't know who to trust. You don't know if you can see what's right before your eyes.
No, I mean, I agree. You know what's the funny thing about what you're saying? My guest last week was Brittany Kaiser and Ruben Heck, who specifically focus on identity and data and how blockchains can help solve a lot of the issues that you have. So now that I'm actually listening to you and hearing what your actual interests are, I think that I should introduce you to both those guys. Neither one of them know you because I talked to them about you. Ruben definitely wants to meet you. You know, I've already expressed to you his proximity to you. And then Brittany, I think you'd be a valuable asset, because I don't think people realize what Brittany's doing. Like, Brittany, number one, is an attorney. People don't realize that. Number two, she's also very adept in computer science. You know, from a technical perspective, she also very much understands a lot of the technology. And C, she worked at Cambridge Analytica, who utilized everything that you're talking about to the extent of manipulating 70 plus elections globally, some outrageous number like that. The biggest one and most notable being this the 2016 election that Trump was elected in. So, I mean, people are very conscious of how to utilize the population's biasness and influence their decision making. So I think that the fact that, you know, you have a set of tools that could potentially help people deal with it. Because even myself, everyone, we all have them. Let me tell you, the hardest pill I ever swallowed was I used to think that Facebook listened to you on your phone. And they probably do, right? But one thing I know for certain, because I know Facebook engineers, literally the guys that used to work on this stuff. And I used to think that Facebook would listen to you. And because they listen to you, they would turn around and provide you with ads. Like me and you talking about on the phone of a conversation, or talking around my phone, we might be talking about something like a sweater or something. Then all of a sudden, that same sweater or similar style of sweater will pop up in your feed as an ad. And I used to swear up and down it was voice recognition. They're listening to us and they got us. When I found out it was actually artificial intelligence that was understanding my thought patterns and processes and offering me suggestive advertising based on my profile, not what I was saying, it blew my mind, and I realized instantly how easily I could be influenced like everyone else. And that leads and extends into what you're talking about. And this is the kind of work that people like Ruben Heck and Brittany Kaiser pretty much dedicating their lives to, because they recognize that problem and they see how that could obviously be destructive to our society. So, I mean, social media has brought us a lot of benefits, but ultimately it's a tool, man. And it can be very dangerous if you're not using it the right way, or if you're allowing it to use you. And remember, there's only two industries that call their customers users. That's the drug industry and social media business. Everyone else calls themselves clients. So that should tell you all you need to know about social media if they're calling you a user. Okay, so with that being said, Sean, I want to thank you for your time. I know you're a man of schedules, and it looks like you're not at home. I wanted you to get back to your beautiful wife and your family. Tell Sydney I say hi. I appreciate you guys. Everyone in the comment section, if you're there, I can't see you. I love you guys. We'll catch you next week. Sean is going to be a part of our about our family, let's say, we'll call it. And with that, you know, hopefully you guys who have any suggestions or questions about the maxims that we'll post tomorrow on all of our channels, or direct questions for him in particular, we can find a way to satisfy that. We don't want to overburden the guy, because if he takes 3 days to get back to me, then he's a busy guy. So, you know, I want you guys to be respectful of the man's time, but at the same time, this is the reason why we have this community. But I'm hoping that what we can do is create a framework where guys like Sean, and he's not the only one, by the way, I have a ton of other people, but Sean is the one that puts most on paper, which is what I like, is the fact that you can have an established parameter of how we behave. But as we start to build out more and more of our network and really expand on the digital front and on the internet, we're going to have all this information, these resources available with the people who are responsible for them, and hopefully that'll make our community stronger. So that's what I have for you guys tonight. I want to thank my guest, Mr. Sean King, once again for joining us tonight, giving us some of his time right around dinner time. We got to figure out a way that we can cleverly change Crypto Monday's time if we're going to do these virtual events to maximize dinner for the rest of us. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week. We have another dope episode coming up. Happy holidays to everyone out there, whether it's Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, I don't care. Don't get offended. And the same thing, don't get offended if you do celebrate and someone doesn't. Just, you know, live your life, enjoy your life, have fun, and be cool, man. I'm Muslim. I just gave away thousands of dollars in toys in a toy drive the other day, just because it's the right thing to do to people that need. And so just have fun, enjoy your lives, respect other people, and hopefully we can make some good decisions moving forward. That's it for now. Crypto Monday, San Juan signing off. Sean, I thank you. You guys have a good night.
Thank you, guys. you.